Real privilege. In a lot of ways, you're, at least for me, I know the entrepreneurs, a true hero of the startup world.
Thank
The
you.
founder of WordPress, and I believe it's 19% of the world's websites now?
17 and a half.
17.5% of the world's websites. How many websites is that are using WordPress?
Ooh, I don't know the exact number.
It's tens of millions then, at least.
Yeah.
It's crazy, man. So I guess let's go back. Can we go back to the start and just how you came up with WordPress, how this idea started, why the platform was initially built?
Sure. So WordPress, as you know, is an open source project.
Yeah.
It was actually based on an existing open source project that came before it. So I had started blogging. I visited Washington, D.C., took a lot of photos, wanted to share them with friends back home. And just started posting things. You know, the captions on the photos got longer and longer, so I was like, well, I should start a blog. I went through a few different things. Movable type was very popular at the time. And then I found a software called B2. And B2 is sort of the first open source simple project I had used. And I started hacking on it and contributing code. And the first code I did was actually called Texturize. The tagline was, so good it makes your quotes curl. And what it did was it took regular plain text and turned it into the proper typographic entities. So quotes turn into curly quotes, 3 periods turn into ellipses, space dash dash space turns into an M dash, or an N dash if appropriate. So basically taking all the things that were proper typographic entities and doing it. And the code was accepted into the software. And I got a total high from that. Because I knew there were thousands of websites using B2, and they were all running this code I had written now. And it's pretty much the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, and how old were you then?
I was probably 18 or 19.
18 or 19, and then just one thing led to another. You kept coding, or what took the project further?
Kept coding, and I was kind of freelancing, just building websites and computers actually for local musicians and businesses. And what happened was B2 was effectively, it got abandoned. So there was only one lead developer, and he kind of disappeared. So the project was just kind of in a limbo state because no one really knew what to do with it. Myself and one of the other guys who volunteered on the forums a lot and also contributed code, I did a blog post and said, hey, I'm not sure where this is going. I like these other platforms like Text Pattern, Movable Type, Blogger, but they're all missing something. Chiefly that they weren't open source, so they didn't have the freedom that was given to you by open source software. And so I was like, I'd love something that combined the best of all of these. And Mike left a comment on the blog, actually 10 years ago on March 27th, and said, if you're serious about this, let's work on it together.
Yeah.
Even though we had never met, he was in the UK, I was in Houston, we just started collaborating over the internet.
Yeah. And then was that the birth of WordPress, or was it something different when you started working on it?
And that was it. We just kind of started hacking on it.
Yeah.
He had a thing for managing a link manager, like a blog roll.
Yeah.
He started bringing in, I started working on the admin side and the installation, what would eventually turn into our famous 5-minute installation.
Nice, man.
We called it famous even though there were no users at the time.
But that worked, right?
It works, totally.
Aspirational branding. Yeah.
You call it famous, and like Famous Amos. Is it really that? Are those cookies really that famous?
Yeah.
No.
It's like
But
Seattle's best. Is it the best, right?
I don't know. But so that was actually sort of our first foray into branding and marketing. And it worked well.
Yeah. Was it tough starting with a co-founder you'd never worked with and in different regions of the world, or did you guys just dive in?
We weren't really co-founders because there wasn't really a business.
Totally.
We were both just volunteers on the same open source project. And he had a real job and I didn't, so I ended up spending a lot more time on it in general. But Mike was really key, especially in terms of he was a real programmer and I really hadn't had any formal training. So I learned a ton from just working with him.
Yeah.
And over all the years I was heavily involved with developing for WordPress. I learned so much from the other contributors. It made me a much, much better developer.
So now you have hundreds of millions of users on this platform. It's what we run all of our websites on. WordPress is awesome. Thank you. But when did you start to realize that this could become something huge? It sounds like initially it was just kind of fun, something you're passionate about. You were your own customer. When did it start to get bigger than yourself?
It was definitely a slow, organic growing over the first. In fact, I looked at an early interview. I was like, there might be 15,000 websites running this software. I was like, wow, it wasn't very many. The first thing was the first localization. So some fellow in Japan had downloaded this software. We had no translation framework, so he downloaded it and literally went line by line through tens of thousands of lines of code and changed every English string to a Japanese string. Who knows how many hours this took him, maybe hundreds. And it blew me away because one, loading the software, like I downloaded it and ran it. And it was so bizarre, surreal, and beautiful to see this thing that looked like what we had worked on and created, but with this beautiful, beautiful Japanese script everywhere. Like, it was almost like a different world, completely alien to me. And just the effort that he put into it, I was like, wow. Sort of got me out of my head in Texas to thinking about this as a global phenomenon. And then second, which was kind of our tipping point, was this software called Movable Type had 95% market share at the time. In fact, when WordPress started, people said there was no room for any more blogging software because there were literally so many packages out there already, dozens and dozens. That was our biggest criticism. So Movable Type had tons of users, and they had become a business and raised funding and had dozens of employees at that point. And they decided to change their licensing because they had a proprietary license. So to try to basically get enterprises to pay more, they changed their pricing scheme. So people who previously might pay $30 for unlimited blogs were going to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars just to upgrade to the latest version. And the other mistake they made was they didn't add any features in the latest version. So it was kind of this, you'd have to pay a lot for really nothing new. So this caused a huge uproar in the blogosphere, as we called it. And a lot of the prominent movable type users ended up switching to WordPress, including one in particular. His name was Mark Pilgrim. And he wrote a beautiful essay called Freedom Zero. And basically he talked about when you use proprietary software, you're always at the whims of whoever writes the license. And some of these licenses have bizarre terms in them. There's some software at the time that said you couldn't criticize the developer using the software.
Crazy.
It's those long things. We all sign them, right? Like every time iTunes upgrades, right? 80 pages of terms. You just click agree. There's weird stuff in there. And including some of it around how you can use it. They can change the pricing at any time, the number of sites you can do with it. And you fundamentally don't have any rights there. Open source has what's called the 4 freedoms. They start counting from 0 because they're geeks. Nice. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3. And freedom 0 is the freedom to use the software for any purpose, meaning no one can tell you what you can or can't do with the software. In good ways, but also you could start a Nazi site. We can't say you can't. You have complete freedom of speech with that regards. And what he did is he wrote about how he was switching because of the freedom, not because of the price. He said to upgrade to movable type, I'd have to pay $535. I'm taking that money, I'm donating it to the WordPress developers. And by far, I think it's still the largest donation we ever got. And it really caused people to think about proprietary licenses and open source, and WordPress as an option there.
That's awesome. And when you were building this, were you at home or were you in university? You said 19, 20 years old or so when you first started out?
So at this point, I'm at University of Houston, but I moved out from my parents' house to an apartment. University of Houston is kind of a commuter school. It's not really, people don't really live on campus. But I was thoroughly neglecting my classes.
Yeah. And what did your parents think about this when you started really diving into it?
I don't know. I mean, they've always been super supportive. My original plan was to become a musician, and they were supportive of that as well. So it was just kind of, I think they were happy I was paying my bills, through the consulting I was doing. And Houston is a very inexpensive city.
Yeah. That's a big question. A lot of our entrepreneurs who are switching into open source software, hardware, plants, whatever it might be. And one of the questions is what's the business model that can go around that just to sustain the team? What is the business model of WordPress nowadays? Where does revenue come in from?
Well, in those days there was no business model. It's worth distinguishing that before I founded the company Automatic, I, just like everyone else, was working on WordPress as a volunteer. And in fact, everyone who works on the core software is still a volunteer. Which is actually kind of nice because it forces you to figure out the user model first, which is actually what a lot of startups do when they raise millions of dollars and have no business plan. When I started Automatic, though, I wanted to create a sustainable business because primarily I wanted someplace I could work for a very long time and that I could enable other WordPress contributors to still work on WordPress and get a paycheck. Because to me, that seemed like pretty much the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah.
So from the beginning, even though we raised money, I wanted the company to be profitable. So at the time, I thought of it in terms of ringtones, right? So the idea that the blog would be free and free forever, but there could be add-ons that would cost money, be it a custom theme, a domain, so you have your own domain in the world, extra space, video capabilities. And actually, to this day, our business looks a lot like that original business plan. 70 or 80% of our revenue is subscriptions from just regular consumers paying $50 or $100 a year for some of these upgrades.
Your team today, it's about 100 people?
150.
150 people, and they're all around the world?
Yeah, so we have about 20 people in the San Francisco area, about half of which go into the headquarters about once a week.
Nice.
The 130 are spread to the four winds.
I think it's amazing to be running a platform with so many users, with such global adoption, with 150 people who are just kind of distributed around the globe. Is that hard, and what challenges kind of come along with such a distributed team?
In some ways, it feels like a huge number, because for a long time we were kind of in the 15, 20 person range. And I feel like I was kind of artificially keeping the company that size, because it was hard for me to imagine what the company would work like when we got bigger. And remember I said I wanted to have a place that I could work. Many of the things I associated with jobs I had had in the past that I didn't like, I sort of associated with the bigness of it, with the number of people involved. I just kind of assumed that everything got crappy the more people there were. So you didn't ask it, but I'll say that was my earliest mistake as well, was kind of artificially constraining the size because thinking that growth equaled the company not being good anymore or not being fast or innovative. So when some of the initial key early hires, it was amazing to see how one person could change the business so much. Like a single person's influence, especially when you're that highly leveraged, tens of millions of users almost per employee. One person can have a huge difference. And so that's what got me excited about being able to scale the organization. And now I can imagine us being thousands of people large and still keeping the things I like and love and cherish about the organization today. What's difficult about being distributed, all the same stuff that's difficult in an office is also hard. So getting everyone on the same page, people with an office have trouble with that as well. Communication, obviously, is extremely important. I say it's the oxygen of a distributed company. Those things are hard. Some things are a lot easier. For example, there's not really a lot of politics, and everyone kind of likes each other. Yeah. As a company, we actually get together, the whole company, once a year, and the individual teams, which are typically 5 to 10 people, 2 or 3 times a year. And we say what we save in office space costs, we blow on travel.
Nice.
So we let teams go wherever they want in the world. Yeah. So there's been meetups in Athens, Barcelona, Hawaii, Japan, just pretty much anywhere. And it's kind of like, even if, like, let's say you're in the cubicle next to me and like you chew your food really loudly, and that grates me every single day, and I grow to like silently loathe you. You don't have that when you're distributed. Totally. You can chew your food however you want. You can sort of design your own office that is going to be infinite. Everyone can have a corner office. There's no sort of jockeying for position or being next to the noisy ping pong table or anything like that. So it kind of takes out a lot of the normal office dynamics and just focuses on results. I don't care what people wear, whether they have shoes on or not, whether they are, what color they are, how they speak. Really the only things that are important are written communication and getting stuff done.
What is the culture that you hope to see out of this team? Are there any core values that you guys work with?
Yeah, and we published it. We have a creed that, I don't even remember how it was written, probably in an open source way, a few years ago. And we actually put it on our employment offers. So when we send someone an offer to join the company, it's got all the legal stuff, which we actually put in a legalese tag. And then at the bottom, below all that, it has the creed, and then below that is where you sign. So just the idea that you're not just taking a job with these legal obligations, you're sort of signing up. Number one is I will always be learning.
Awesome.
Just the idea that almost nothing else matters. I know that we're a technology company. The technologies that we're going to be primarily using 5 years from now are not what we're using today. So it almost really doesn't matter hiring someone who has 5 years experience or 10 years experience in anything. All that matters is, are they curious? Are they always going to be sort of advancing, approaching their work as a craft, not just as a job, so always trying to make themselves better? Do they have good taste? You can't teach taste. And good work ethic.
Yeah, that's it. What you talked about, one of the mistakes they've kind of made along the way, controlling the growth of the team, trying to keep it small.
Sure.
What other mistakes have you made along the way that when you look back on them, you're like, wow, should have done that one differently?
So many. Often the mistakes are opportunity costs rather than something that's an actual big mistake. So the not hiring, I think, was an opportunity cost. We probably could have grown quicker earlier had I been more comfortable with running a large organization. And then the silly things, like, for example, we had subscriptions, like I mentioned before, but they didn't actually renew. So you had to come back every year and rebuy everything, which naturally has a higher attrition rate, churn rate, than if you renew it, which every company in the entire world does. It turns out every company does that because our revenue pretty much started doubling as soon as we did renewals. When I think about of all the years we didn't do renewals, I feel a little silly. And I think we're very lucky to have extremely patient investors that have allowed me to make many of my own mistakes.
What would you say if an entrepreneur has a company, an idea, there's a lot of promise behind it, they're going out to raise a round. What are maybe the 2 or 3 biggest misconceptions of that process?
I mean, common mistakes I see are that the idea is important. That's actually the biggest one. Other than that, I would say there's a million little things around terms. But luckily, there's sites like Venture Hacks now that just have such incredible information around all the standard documents. And documents have become more standard. People do convertible notes instead of investment. Everything is just like, I would say, 100 times easier and simpler than it was even 7 or 8 years ago when Automatic started. Typically, the funding environment has changed, though. Even though the terms are better than ever, investors have higher expectations for traction coming in. So, we had a lot of traction when we raised our first round, which was $1 million, 1.1 actually. Because there were already hundreds of thousands of users of WordPress. Even though I was 19, 20, I already kind of proved myself at this sort of thing. And so there was less market or product risk. Today, it's kind of standard to have 50 or 100,000 users before you even raise your seed round, where before you would have raised $1 million and then built it. So I think the dynamics have just shifted, partly because the costs have come down, and the ease of distribution, thanks to social networks and mobile apps, is you can grow a lot quicker, a lot faster for the amount of money that you can put on your credit card versus having to raise venture rounds. The other main misconception is that people think that investors are in it forever, I guess. And investors have timelines just like anyone else. And in fact, many VC funds, they have a vintage, meaning if it started in, let's say, 2000, they might have 7 or 10 years to return the money to their investors, possibly with a 3-year extension. So if you raised money, and you could have raised money in 2004, but if they invested you in that 2000 fund, around 2013, the clock is ticking. They are forced to give their money back to investors. Their investors, they are limited partners. People a lot of times say that taking an investor is like getting married.
Not really, though.
It's more like having a kid with someone, to be honest. It's a lot more intimate because you're kind of stuck together for, call it 18 years. Regardless of whether you want to be or not, or want to get a divorce or not, or whatever it is, you still have this shared thing, your company, your child, that you're now partners in. And so you want to go into it with someone that you want to be with through the good and the bad, and sickness and in health, so the exit does you part.
And nowadays, you're doing some angel investing yourself, right?
I've done about 35 angel investments, yeah.
Awesome. So now when you're on the investor side of the equation, what is it that you're really looking for in the projects that you're getting behind?
Well, it's a little bit easier because I'm not a real investor, right? It's not my job. So it's not like I have LPs that I have to show returns to or a vintage fund that I have to pay back at some point. So mostly I love things that are open source. I love marketplace-based ideas and things that I might work on if I weren't doing automatic. So like I try to imagine myself, well, if I wasn't doing WordPress, what would I have fun with? And those are the kind of things I look for. Perfect example is probably MakerBot. It's a 3D printer, ton of open source in the community and originally in the hardware. And it's something I can completely imagine myself working on if I weren't doing this.
And with MakerBot specifically, I know some of it's gone kind of closed source.
Yeah.
With the hardware, how do you think that was the right decision for the company to make?
No, I don't actually.
Yeah.
That's another nice thing about being an angel, though, is that I'm not joining boards, I'm not telling entrepreneurs what to do, so I'm at their service.
Yeah.
And that's the way I think it's best to approach it as an investor. Sort of never bug people, but always pick up the phone when they call.
And so for you now, you have this incredible global user base. You have a team working around the world. You probably have, tens of thousands of volunteers who contribute to the platform. What's next for WordPress? Where is it moving?
I obsess over that other 83% of the web that we don't have yet. And so, there's a much longer road ahead of us than what we've done so far. We're about to hit 10 years. But I'm not at all satisfied with the software or with what we've done in terms of our mission, which is to democratize publishing for the world. It's such a small fraction. There's 6.999 billion people who don't have a website yet, who don't have a blog yet, who don't have WordPress yet. And to reach them, it's funny because we've kind of had to recreate the product almost from scratch every kind of 3 to 4 years. And so while I've been working on something called WordPress for a while now, the actual reality of the day-to-day what I do and what we're working on has changed a ton. From being really just very simplistic blog software, being powerful blog software, being a CMS, something people build their entire website with. Today, more and more people are using it as actually an application platform, not unlike a Django or Ruby on Rails. They're building things that don't look like a blog or website at all. Mobile apps. So, to me, that's what keeps it really engaging and what gets me excited to go to work every day.
Will you stick with the company as the founder? Is this your life's work?
Yeah, I never plan to leave. The nice thing is that even within the company, we have different things at different stages. So, for example, WordPress.com is worldwide. It's at scale. VaultPress, which is our backup and security service, or say Jetpack, which is our plugin for self-hosted blogs, are very much at the startup stage. We have the new WordPress.com reader. That's an entirely new product within WordPress.com. There's 4 people working on it. That's doing something that's now driving, double-digit growth of its core metrics every single month. So it's kind of like being in a fast-growing startup just with relatively unlimited resources and the ability to bootstrap from the existing user base. I think the key that I see, and the reason I see myself with Automatic forever, is that I really love the people side of things. Hiring the right people, building teams, rearranging teams to have better fits, listening to requests and trying to address them, listening in general to as many people as possible inside and outside the company, and using that to sort of inform decisions. Those things are endlessly compelling because every single situation is unique. So it never gets boring because what you're doing every day changes. And those problems at 15 people are different at 150, and I'm sure will be different at 15,000. But when it's so beautiful to see the growth, also of people within it. Folks who joined when we were 5 or 10 people are now running a significant percentage of the web. Guys who had never done that before. People who had never been leads before might start in support and literally work their way up to the highest levels of the company. We've been around long enough that that's happened more than a few times, and it's incredibly rewarding.
What compelled you to fly halfway across the world and join us?
I was actually going to turn that around and say, what compelled you to ask me to?
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
I think that for me personally, you're somebody I really look up to as an entrepreneur. I think you lean in with your values first, and to see that be really successful is something I think we can all learn from.
Cool, thank you. I came out because it seemed really crazy, and you guys have not disappointed. So, I mean, the curse of, I would say, a distributed company is I've actually been very busy on this trip, because you can't really stop working just because you're out of the office. The office is wherever you have a laptop and internet, and if the internet's not good, it's a little frustrating. I racked up about, I think, $75 in tethering charges yesterday, and because the internet was down on the ship for a couple of hours, and I was like, very quickly, and they send you a text message every $25. I'm like, this is getting pricey. And I was just doing like lightweight stuff. I wasn't even like streaming Hulu or something. Yeah. So that's what's great for me, is that part of the reason I designed the company to be like this is to afford the flexibility to be from anywhere. And the global aspect of Unreasonable at Sea excited me. Both the idea, I mean, it's also cool that you can go different places and maybe have businesses and contacts in these different countries. But also just the idea that you can do the work while on a freaking boat going around the world seems like a huge challenge, but constraints breed creativity. I know that when I've been in situations where I'm a little more offline, it's actually fantastic for the team because they step up. There was a WordPress meetup last night I went to, which was a lot of fun. So I got to meet a lot of the local Cape Town WordPress community. I had a miss. WordPress.com, obviously our largest thing, doesn't have a general manager or anything. What there is there's basically 5 main teams that work on it. And every 2 weeks, the 5 teams get together in a Google Hangout.
Nice.
And it's funny, we actually had no meetups in the company before Google Hangout existed. Once we used it, I was like, oh, this thing's actually pretty cool. Let's have some meetings. Yeah. So every 2 weeks, this group gets together and kind of checks in, talks about the plan, make sure we're all on the same page, and if there's any way the team can help each other. And I join these meetings. And it's kind of, again, for our most important product, this is all the management I do. So I'm very important that I be there, to me, at least. I knew I was going to miss it yesterday, both because of bandwidth and internet concerns, but also because of this WordPress meetup. And so I said to the team, just do it without me. Just, if you need a decision, don't wait for me. Just make the decision as a group. Just do all the same things they normally do. Sure. And a lot of places in Automatic, we have rotating responsibilities. So a different person takes notes whenever there's a meeting. There's always notes, and that rotates between the team. Some teams have rotating leadership positions, rotating support. So every person who joins the company, whether the CFO or our office manager, does 3 weeks of support to start. And then every team loops back and does a week of that, at least once a year. So some of these rotating roles, I think, help people, think of the business more as an owner. Because if you're an owner or a founder, you do everything. Totally. My team was actually called janitorial. Because we just do whatever it takes. If that means a mop, we grab the mop and we clean up. And I think you also develop empathy for the importance of some of these other positions. Support is just as hard a job as our CFO.
So how do you keep an environment and a culture within the team that's still coming up with these next, creative ideas and solutions and still running as if resources weren't limitless?
Well, we're very limited in human capital. So we've never been financially capital constrained because of the success we've had so far in our financial metrics, any amount of money we need, as long as I can think of a halfway decent plan for it. Yeah. And even sometimes when I haven't had a halfway decent plan, there's been lots of capital available. It's always been gated by people. And again, one of the things I learned a lot is that as we've gotten more people, the breadth and depth of what we're able to do has gotten a lot deeper. And so we're able to do deep work on many more things. Where before, I feel like we do a lot of version 1.0s and then just forget about it and never come back to it. So I think one of the most important aspects for any entrepreneur is to be able to hold completely conflicting ideas in your head at the same time and believe them both. Yeah. And so throughout the company, we have this idea that we're not capital constrained. If there was anything that we could do to grow and make a better product for our users that required more money than we currently have, it's available. But at the same time, we're super frugal. And I think frugality is just a state of mind. It's how you do your servers. It's how you travel. It's how you what you order when the team's at dinner. It's what bottle of wine you get. It's, it's kind of reflects itself in a million little decisions that really no corporate policy or creed or anything could really ever encapsulate. It's just kind of something that people see. If you're the founder, they see what you do, they follow. So you just kind of have to live it.
Is that your philosophy on leadership? Lead by doing?
Leadership is so nuanced. Yes, you have to lead by doing. Whatever you do, as a founder, the most important things you do are hire and set the culture. And so whatever you do becomes the culture. Another mistake I learned was I get a lot of email. And so I like being efficient when I'm emailing, which sometimes means that I can be economical with my words. It turns out that online this comes across as very curt, or people would actually think I'm angry all the time, which, if you know me, seems not the case. I'm actually super laid back. But online I came across just very abrupt. So sort of had to learn to say hello at the beginning of emails, sign them, say in 20 words what I might normally say in 5 or 8. Smileys are amazing.
They go a long way.
Use them liberally, but not passive aggressively. That's a key as well. Wow, that really sucked. Wink. So just sort of being a little more nuanced, particularly in text-based communication, was really key. And also just learning to pick up the phone or go to Skype or Google Chat a lot more has been, I think, key in me having a better empathy, and also folks being able to relate more and be on the same page with what I'm thinking and what I'm at.